I'm Scarlett Mitchell, 28 years old, sitting across from my father at Le Bernardin on my birthday. He slides an envelope toward me, eyes cold. Not a card. Disownment papers. You're a disappointment to the Mitchell legacy, he says flatly. Mom and Jason avert their gazes. My phone rings, unknown number. I answer, desperate for escape. Miss Mitchell, this is Robert Caldwell, CEO of Pinnacle Industries. Congratulations, you've been selected as our new Director of Operations. Before I dive into how my life imploded and then transformed in a single night, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever had a family member betray you, and subscribe to join me for more stories of resilience. Trust me, what happened next will show you that sometimes rejection is just redirection to something better. The Mitchell name has been synonymous with luxury real estate development in Boston for 3 generations. Mitchell Enterprises owns half the waterfront high-rises and has expanded into commercial properties across New England. My grandfather built the foundation, but my father Richard Mitchell turned it into an empire through sheer force of will and cutthroat business tactics. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant living under constant scrutiny. My father ruled our family like he ruled his boardroom, with an iron fist and impossible standards. Every dinner conversation revolved around business strategy. Every family vacation included property tours. Every achievement was measured against its benefit to Mitchell Enterprises. Business is in our blood, Dad would say, his piercing blue eyes scanning between me and my older brother Jason, always assessing, always calculating our worth. For Jason, my father's attention was a spotlight he thrived under. 3 years older than me, he inherited Dad's imposing height, sharp features, and unfortunately his ruthless ambition. From childhood, Jason knew exactly what buttons to push to maintain his position as the golden child. Scarlett's too soft, he'd tell Dad when I objected to their aggressive acquisition tactics. She still believes in fairness. That's why she'll never lead. My mother Diana, once a brilliant architectural designer who gave up her career to support Dad's, floated through our lives like a beautiful ghost. She'd squeeze my hand under the table when Dad's criticism became particularly vicious, but never contradicted him publicly. Her silent complicity hurt almost more than Dad's open disdain. Despite this, I was determined to earn my place. I graduated top of my class at Wharton, earned my MBA from Harvard, and spent 3 years working at a competing firm to gain outside perspective before joining Mitchell Enterprises. On paper, I was everything a family business could want in a successor, but the Mitchell playbook never accounted for a daughter wanting the throne. For 5 years, I worked twice as hard as anyone else at the company. I arrived first, left last, and developed innovative strategies that brought in younger tech-focused clients our traditional approach had missed. Yet in every board meeting, my father directed his questions to Jason, even when presenting my project. The sustainability initiative was my breaking point. After months of research, I developed a comprehensive plan to retrofit our existing properties with green technology, positioning Mitchell Enterprises as an industry leader in environmental responsibility while significantly reducing operational costs long-term. The presentation I prepared was bulletproof, backed by environmental impact studies and projected ROI figures that would impress even my father's bottom-line obsession. The night before the board meeting, I noticed my laptop wasn't where I'd left it in my office. Thinking I'd misplaced it, I used my backup notes to recreate my slides until 3 a.m. When I walked into the boardroom the next morning, exhausted but prepared, Jason was already standing at the head of the table beside our father. "Jason has prepared something special today," my father announced, his hand proudly clasping my brother's shoulder. "A visionary approach that will take Mitchell Enterprises into the future." I watched in horror as Jason clicked through my presentation, my exact slides, my research, my financial projections, all with his name on the cover page. "This is the kind of innovative thinking that makes a true Mitchell," my father said when Jason finished. looking around the room for approval that his board members dutifully provided. I sat frozen, the betrayal stunning me into silence until the meeting adjourned. When I finally cornered Jason in his office, the smirk on his face confirmed everything. "You stole my work," I hissed, shaking with rage. "I optimized a company resource," he replied smoothly. "Your research, my presentation skills. Dad got what he needed. The Mitchell name got the credit. Isn't that what matters? I'm going to tell him the truth." Jason leaned back in his leather chair, entirely unconcerned. "Go ahead. Who do you think he'll believe? His successor or his backup plan?" He stood straightening his custom suit. "Be smart, Scarlett. Your position here is already precarious. Push this and you might find yourself without a job or a family." It wasn't the first time Jason had stolen my work. From science fair projects to college application essays, he'd been taking credit for my efforts our entire lives. But this was different. This was my career, my future, my chance to prove my value not just to our father but to myself. What I didn't realize then was that this betrayal was just the opening act in a much larger drama about to unfold. Le Bernardin wasn't chosen randomly for my birthday dinner. It was calculated, a public venue where I wouldn't make a scene with prices that reminded me of what lifestyle I stood to lose if I didn't fall in line. My father had always weaponized the Mitchell wealth this way. 28 years he began swirling his 20-year-old scotch after the waiter had delivered our appetizers. "Nearly 3 decades of investment in your future, Scarlett." My mother touched up her lipstick, a nervous habit that signaled she knew what was coming. Jason studied his menu with sudden fascination. "And what return have we seen?" Dad continued. "Defiance. Undermining your brother's authority. Questioning business practices that built the fortune you so comfortably enjoy." I set down my fork. "If this is about the sustainability initiative, this is about loyalty," he cut me off. "This is about understanding your place in this family and this company." That's when he slid the envelope across the white tablecloth. Heavy stock paper, Mitchell Enterprises letterhead visible through the translucent material. "What's this?" I asked, though the knot in my stomach already knew. "Open it." Inside was a document titled Familial and Financial Severance. In cold legal language, it outlined my removal from the Mitchell Family Trust, the rescinding of my company shares, termination of my position, and most painfully, a formal statement of disownment. My father had already signed it. There was a line awaiting my mother's signature, and another for Jason as witness. "You're cutting me off." I whispered the words, feeling surreal on my tongue. "Completely." "I'm giving you a choice," my father corrected. "Sign the resignation letter attached, which includes a non-compete clause and non-disclosure agreement, and you'll receive a one-time settlement. Refuse and I'll be forced to make this disownment legal and public. Either way, your time undermining this family is over." My mother's eyes glistened with tears, but her diamond-ringed hand remained steady beside my father's. "Richard, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," he interrupted. "Scarlett has made her priorities clear. They don't align with this family's interests." The numbness spreading through my body was interrupted by my phone vibrating against the table. I normally would have ignored it during a family dinner, but at that moment any distraction was welcome. "Excuse me," I muttered, not really asking permission as I grabbed my phone. "Unknown number, Miss Mitchell. This is Robert Caldwell, CEO of Pinnacle Industries. I apologize for calling during the evening hours." I stood up, moving slightly away from the table. "No problem at all, Mr. Caldwell. What can I do for you?" "I attended your presentation at the Sustainable Development Conference last month, the one your father declined to let you represent Mitchell Enterprises at officially. I had gone anyway using personal days and my own money. Your approach to integrating environmental sustainability with profit-forward strategies was precisely the innovative thinking we're looking for at Pinnacle," he continued. "We'd like to offer you the position of Director of Operations with creative control over our new sustainability division and a compensation package significantly above industry standard. The timing was so eerily perfect I almost laughed. That's quite an offer, Mr. Caldwell. Call me Robert. And it's an offer based purely on merit, Miss Mitchell. Your family name means nothing to me. Your ideas and execution are what impressed our board. The contract is being emailed as we speak. We need you to start in 2 weeks. As we arranged a formal meeting for the following day, I returned to the table where my family sat in stony silence. That was Robert Caldwell, I said, unable to keep a note of triumph from my voice. CEO of Pinnacle Industries. They're offering me Director of Operations. My father's face remained impassive. Pinnacle is half our size. A regional player at best. They're the fastest growing sustainable development company in the country I countered. And they want me for my ideas, not my last name. So you've been interviewing behind our backs, Jason said, feigning hurt. Planning your betrayal all along. I wasn't interviewing. They sought me out after the conference presentation. You forbade me from giving under the Mitchell name. My father picked up the disownment papers, tapping them into a neat stack. This changes nothing. Sign the resignation or face the consequences. In that moment, watching him so casually prepare to erase me from his life, something crystallized in my heart. All those years seeking approval from a man incapable of giving it. All those sacrifices to prove my worth to people who had decided I had none. I stood up, gathering my purse and coat. I don't need to sign anything. Keep your money, keep your name. I release you from any obligation to me, just as I release myself from any obligation to you. Scarlett, don't be dramatic, my mother finally spoke, but made no move to follow me. Happy birthday to me, I said quietly, and walked out of the restaurant into the cool April night, neither my father, mother, nor brother rising to follow me. The furnished apartment on the less fashionable side of Cambridge was a stark downgrade from my corner office view of Boston Harbor, but it came with something I'd never had before: freedom. Freedom from expectation. Freedom from constant comparison. Freedom to breathe. I signed the lease the day after the birthday dinner disaster, using the savings I'd squirreled away over the years. I'd always known on some level that my position in the family was tenuous. Now I was grateful for that paranoia. Moving day consisted of packing 2 suitcases of clothes, my personal laptop, and a single framed photo of my late grandmother, the only Mitchell who had ever truly believed in me. The rest of my belongings remained in my waterfront condo, which was company property. I didn't bother trying to retrieve them. My first day at Pinnacle Industries arrived faster than I expected. Their headquarters occupied a renovated textile mill in Somerville, all exposed brick, reclaimed wood, and natural light. Where Mitchell Enterprises offices were all mahogany and masculine power, Pinnacle felt alive, vibrant, authentic. Scarlett, welcome to the team. Robert Caldwell greeted me himself in the lobby, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and the relaxed confidence of someone with nothing to prove. He led me through an open office floor plan where people actually smiled at each other. I want you to meet your team, he said, guiding me to a conference room where 5 people waited, 3 women and 2 men, all looking genuinely pleased to see me. Team, I echoed, confused. At Mitchell Enterprises, I'd been given a desk and told to earn the right to lead. The sustainability division is yours to build, Robert explained. These are your core members, all experts in their fields. They're excited about your vision. Grace Henderson, the general counsel, handed me a sleek portfolio. We've prepared some materials based on your conference presentation. We thought you might want to hit the ground running. I opened the folder to find my original sustainability framework elaborated upon and expanded by my new team with credit to my original work prominently displayed. I felt a lump form in my throat. Is everything all right? Robert asked, noticing my expression. Yes, I managed. I'm just not used to this. I gestured at the collaborative atmosphere, the acknowledgement of my ideas. Grace's eyes reflected understanding. It takes time to adjust to a healthy environment after a toxic one. The first week passed in a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and the novel experience of being taken seriously. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to undermine me or steal my ideas, but it never happened. Instead, my team built upon them, improved them, expanded them beyond what I could have accomplished alone. By the end of my first month, we had developed a comprehensive proposal for a major Japanese conglomerate looking to establish eco-friendly headquarters in Boston. The Nakamura Group had rejected Mitchell Enterprises' proposal just months earlier, a fact I diplomatically omitted from our preparation meetings. On the day of the presentation, I stood before the Nakamura executives feeling a confidence I'd never experienced under my father's watchful eye. Pinnacle Industries doesn't just build sustainable structures. I told them, we create sustainable legacies. Your company's commitment to environmental stewardship deserves a physical manifestation that inspires for generations. Mr. Nakamura himself nodded as I walked them through our innovative design, which incorporated traditional Japanese architectural elements with cutting-edge green technology. Miss Mitchell, he said, when I concluded, your father told us sustainable development was merely a passing trend when we met with Mitchell Enterprises. Yet you speak of it as the only logical future. Why the difference? The room fell silent. Everyone knew of my family connection. It wasn't exactly a secret in Boston business circles, but no one had mentioned it directly until now. My father built his empire looking backward, I answered honestly. I prefer to build looking forward. Mr. Nakamura smiled. Forward is the only direction worth moving. He stood, extending his hand. Pinnacle Industries will build our American headquarters. The contract was the largest in Pinnacle's history. Robert was ecstatic, the team celebrated, and my reputation in the industry took a seismic shift overnight. I was no longer Richard Mitchell's daughter, but Scarlett Mitchell, the one who landed Nakamura. The celebration was short-lived. The following morning, Robert called me into his office, his expression grave. Your father called me personally this morning, he said without preamble. He claims you stole proprietary information from Mitchell Enterprises before your departure. He's threatening legal action against Pinnacle if we don't terminate you immediately. My stomach dropped. That's completely false. I never. Robert held up a hand. I know. I told him that his accusations said more about Mitchell Enterprises' business practices than they did about you. He leaned forward. Scarlett, I didn't hire you because of your last name, and I'm certainly not going to fire you because of it. But you should be prepared. This is just the opening move. Your success has put you on his radar. I can handle my father, I said, with more confidence than I felt. Robert's smile was grim. Good. Because I'm promoting you to Executive Director of Sustainable Development. You've earned it, and the board agrees. The Nakamura contract is just the beginning. As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The higher you climb, the harder the fall. Remember who taught you to climb. Jay. My brother had always been better at threats than congratulations. The knock on my apartment door came at 11:30 p.m. 3 hard raps that echoed through my small living space. I wasn't expecting anyone, and few people had my new address. Cautiously, I checked the peephole. Jason stood in the hallway, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, his eyes carrying that dangerous gleam that always preceded his worst behavior. I know you're in there, Scar, he called, using the childhood nickname I'd always hated. Neighborly thing to do would be to invite me in. I considered ignoring him, but Jason had never been one to take rejection well. Better to deal with him than risk a scene that would disturb my neighbors. I unlocked the door but kept the chain on. It's almost midnight, Jason. What do you want? His smile didn't reach his eyes. Can't a brother visit his little sister? Nice place, by the way. Very modest. Dad would be horrified. That was rather the point, I replied flatly. If you've come to gloat, you've wasted a trip. Gloat? Why would I gloat? Because you're living in this glorified dorm room while I'm running Mitchell Enterprises. Because you've thrown away your birthright for a second-tier company. He laughed, but there was an edge to it. No, Scar, I'm here to offer you a lifeline. I reluctantly unhooked the chain, and let him in more to get him out of the hallway than from any desire for his company. Jason immediately began prowling my apartment, picking up the few possessions I'd accumulated, assessing their value with dismissive glances. "Dad's angry," he said finally, settling uninvited on my sofa. "But he'll get over it if you apologize. Come back to Mitchell Enterprises. Junior position, of course. You'll have to earn back trust." "I landed Nakamura," I said simply. The flash of rage across his features was quickly masked, but I caught it. A lucky break. One project doesn't make a career. "Why are you really here, Jason?" He leaned forward, dropping the facade. "The Nakamura project was supposed to be mine. You deliberately undercut us." "I did no such thing. I presented a better proposal. That's business. It's personal and you know it." He stood abruptly. "You think you've won something here, but you've just painted a target on your back. Dad wants to know what else you're working on at Pinnacle, what other clients you're approaching. I'm not giving you corporate intelligence. Family loyalty used to mean something to you. It still does. That's why I'm not betraying my new family at Pinnacle, who've shown me more respect in 2 months than Mitchell Enterprises did in 5 years. Jason's expression darkened. "You always were stubborn. Fine. Have it your way." He headed for the door, then turned back. "But remember, I tried to do this the easy way. What happens next is on you." The next morning I discovered what next meant. 3 members of my team were waiting in my office, looking uncomfortable. "Your brother approached us at Kingsley's bar last night," said Marcus, our lead architect. "Offered us each double our salary to feed him information about our projects." My blood ran cold. "What did you tell him?" "To go to hell," said Emma, our environmental compliance expert, looking offended I'd even asked. But he implied he'd already gotten someone on the inside. Said he knew about the Singapore bid. The Singapore bid was highly confidential, a major project we were finalizing that would establish Pinnacle's presence in the Asian market. Only our core team knew the details. "Thank you for telling me," I said, trying to mask my concern. "I'll handle this." I spent the next 3 days personally reviewing security protocols, changing passwords, and meeting individually with every team member to gauge their loyalty. All seemed genuinely appalled by Jason's approach, but corporate espionage was a serious threat. I couldn't afford to take chances. Just as I thought we'd contained the situation, the first rumors began circulating. At an industry cocktail party, I overheard a competitor's executive mention concern about my stability. When I pressed for details, he awkwardly mentioned stories going around about me having an emotional breakdown after leaving Mitchell Enterprises. By the following week, the whispers had grown louder. Clients began asking pointed questions about my departure from the family business. One even directly asked if I was seeing a therapist as recommended by concerned family members. The campaign was classic, Jason, just enough truth mixed with damaging lies to seem plausible. Yes, I'd left Mitchell Enterprises abruptly. Yes, there had been family conflict. But the narrative being crafted painted me as unstable, vindictive, possibly even having stolen company secrets in a fit of rage. I knew confronting my brother directly would only feed the narrative, but I couldn't let the sabotage continue. I scheduled a meeting with him at his office, determined to end this publicly. The Mitchell Enterprises tower still felt like home when I walked through the lobby, which made the security guard's hesitation to let me upstairs all the more painful. "Miss Mitchell, I'll need to call up for authorization." Jason made me wait 30 minutes in the reception area before his assistant finally escorted me to his office, my former office now redecorated to erase any trace of my presence. "This needs to stop," I said without preamble. "The rumors, the client interference, all of it." Jason leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxed confidence. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You're sabotaging me because you're threatened. Because for the first time people are seeing what I can do without the Mitchell name holding me back." "That's quite an accusation from someone whose mental health has been questioned lately," he said smoothly. "Perhaps the pressure of your new position is getting to you. We both know what you're doing. It stops now or I'll be forced to take more drastic measures." His smile turned predatory. Threatening me in my own office, not very stable behavior, is it, Scar? He pressed a button on his desk phone. Nancy, can you come in here and bring security? I realized too late that he'd been recording our conversation. When security arrived, Jason played back, selected portions, my voice raised in frustration, the word drastic measures isolated from context. My sister is having another episode, he told them with false concern. Please escort her from the building. Gently. As I was led out, I noticed the security cameras in the corners of his office. I had walked right into his trap, providing him with footage he could manipulate to further his narrative about my supposed instability. That night, a heavily edited video began circulating in business circles, Scarlett Mitchell being escorted from Mitchell Enterprises while appearing to have an emotional outburst. The damage to my professional reputation was immediate and severe. 3 potential clients canceled meetings. An industry publication ran a piece questioning Pinnacle's judgment in hiring me. In one calculated move, Jason had validated every whispered rumor and created tangible evidence of my supposed instability. He'd turned my righteous anger into a weapon against me, just as he'd done our entire lives. But this time I wouldn't let him win. Robert Caldwell's office had always felt welcoming until that morning. The emergency board meeting had been called specifically about me, and the tension was palpable as I entered the room. 8 board members sat in uncomfortable silence, several avoiding eye contact. Scarlett Robert began formally, I'm sure you're aware of the, situation that's developed. On the conference table, someone had placed printouts of business journal headlines, Mitchell family drama spills into corporate arena, heiress's mental stability questioned after dramatic exit, and most damaging, Pinnacle Industries risky bet on troubled executive. The video, I said quietly, among other things, confirmed Eliza Harrington, the most senior board member. Several major investors have expressed concerns about the company's judgment in promoting someone with apparent issues. The Singapore bid is at risk, added CFO Thomas Wilson. Their representatives specifically mentioned stability of leadership as a key factor in their decision. I took a deep breath. The video is heavily edited. I went to confront my brother about his sabotage attempts, and he manipulated the situation to create exactly this outcome. That may be true, Robert said carefully, but perception matters in this industry. We need to decide how to address this immediately. I knew what they were considering. Removing me from client-facing roles, a leave of absence, perhaps even termination to protect Pinnacle's reputation. Everything I'd built was on the verge of collapse because of my brother's machinations. If I may, a voice spoke from the doorway. Grace Henderson, Pinnacle's general counsel, stood with a leather portfolio under her arm. I have some relevant information the board should consider before making any decisions. Robert nodded for her to continue, and Grace took a seat beside me. I worked at Mitchell Enterprises for 3 years before joining Pinnacle. She began sliding documents across the table to each board member. During that time, I witnessed systematic discrimination against female executives, particularly those who challenged Richard Mitchell's authority. She tapped the folder. These are copies of settled complaints from 5 former female executives who experienced similar smear campaigns after leaving Mitchell Enterprises. Note the pattern: questioning mental stability, selective editing of interactions, strategic rumors to undermine professional reputations. The board members flipped through the documents with growing concern. Furthermore, Grace continued, I've had our digital forensics team analyze the circulated video. It's been edited in at least 7 places, with audio from different conversations spliced together. We've prepared a statement detailing the manipulation, ready to send to all major business publications. I stared at Grace in shock. She hadn't mentioned any of this to me before the meeting. Miss Henderson, Robert said slowly, why haven't you shared this information previously? Grace's expression remained professional. The settled complaints were under confidentiality agreements. However, Mitchell Enterprises' direct attack on a Pinnacle executive constitutes an extraordinary circumstance that justifies disclosure to protect our company's interests. "And why are you personally advocating for Miss Mitchell?" asked Eliza Harrington. Grace turned to me, and for the first time I saw real emotion in her eyes. Because I was one of those women. 7 years ago, I was on track to become Mitchell Enterprises' first female partner. When I questioned Richard's handling of a sexual harassment case, I experienced exactly what Scarlett is experiencing now. The difference is, I didn't have anyone to stand up for me. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Grace Henderson, the coolly professional, always composed legal expert, had suffered at my family's hands just as I was suffering now. Miss Mitchell didn't steal company secrets, Grace continued, addressing the board directly. She didn't have a breakdown. She simply refused to be diminished any longer, and for that her family is attempting to destroy her. If Pinnacle abandons her now, we're no better than Mitchell Enterprises. Robert looked around the table, taking the temperature of the board. "What do you suggest?" "We counterattack," Grace said simply. "We release the forensic analysis of the video. We publicly support Scarlett. We show potential clients that Pinnacle stands by its people and won't be intimidated by old money bullies with outdated tactics." "It's risky," Thomas Wilson cautioned. "Mitchell Enterprises has deep connections." "So do we," Robert replied, a new resolve in his voice. "And unlike Richard Mitchell, we've built those connections through innovation and integrity, not fear and manipulation." He turned to me. "Scarlett, are you prepared for what comes next? This will get uglier before it gets better." For the first time since the video had circulated, I felt hope. "With Pinnacle behind me, absolutely." "Then it's decided," Robert announced. Grace released the forensic analysis. Thomas reach out personally to the Singapore representatives, explain the situation, and offer to fly them here to meet with Scarlett directly. As for the rest of us, he looked around the room, time to remind the industry who Pinnacle Industries is. As the board members filed out, I remained seated, still processing what had just happened. Grace gathered her documents, pausing beside my chair. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she replied. 7 years ago, I let them drive me out of Mitchell Enterprises. I've regretted it ever since. When I saw your name on the hiring list, I worried history would repeat itself." She gave me a small smile. "I'm glad to be wrong. I had no idea my father had done this to others. That's by design. Isolation is a powerful weapon. It makes you think you're the problem." As Grace turned to leave, she added, "By the way, our security team discovered someone purchased a significant number of Pinnacle shares through a shell company last week." "My father," I whispered. "Looks that way. He's buying his way onto the board." "To force me out?" Grace's smile turned determined. "Well, he'll have to go through both of us now." As she left, I realized I'd just gained something I'd never truly had before, an ally who understood exactly what I was fighting. The Mitchell family had created 2 enemies who were now united against them, and they had no idea what was coming. The text came on a Sunday morning: "Lunch tomorrow. I miss you, Mom." I stared at my phone, conflicted. In the 3 months since the birthday dinner disaster, my mother had made no attempt to contact me. Not when I moved out, not when the rumors started, not even when the manipulated video circulated. Her silence had been another form of betrayal. Yet some small stubborn part of me still yearned for her approval, her love. Maybe she'd finally found her courage. Maybe she was ready to stand up to my father. Against my better judgment, I texted back noon. "Caffè Bella on Newbury." I chose the location strategically public enough to prevent a scene, but quiet enough for a real conversation. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner where we wouldn't be easily overheard. My mother appeared precisely at noon, immaculate, as always in a Chanel suit, her blonde hair perfectly styled, not a wrinkle or imperfection visible. Diana Mitchell had made an art form of flawless presentation. "Scarlett," she said, embracing me with the careful hug of someone afraid of wrinkling their clothes. "You look healthy." Translation: "You've gained weight and your clothes are off the rack." The Mitchell women had always been expected to maintain a certain aesthetic. "You look the same, Mom," I replied honestly. She did the same as she had for the past 20 years, preserved in amber like a beautiful insect. She ordered a salad, no dressing. I ordered pasta, suddenly hungry. Your father doesn't know I'm here, she said once the waiter had left. He would be displeased. Is that why you've ignored my existence for 3 months? Dad would be displeased? Her perfectly manicured fingers fidgeted with her napkin. You know how he gets when he's crossed. The disownment wasn't my idea, Scarlett. I've been trying to soften his position, but you know your father. Yes, I did know my father. I also knew my mother had spent 30 years enabling his worst behavior while claiming helplessness. I've heard about your success at Pinnacle, she continued, her voice warming slightly. The Nakamura contract was quite a coup. Thank you, I said, genuinely surprised by her acknowledgement. Your father would never admit it, but Mitchell Enterprises has felt your absence. Jason is struggling with some of the accounts you managed. A small petty part of me savored that information. I'm sure he'll figure it out. He always lands on his feet. He's under tremendous pressure. Your father's expectations have shifted entirely to him now. For the first time, genuine emotion flickered across her face. The company has become tense since you left. Your father is obsessed with Pinnacle's movements. He monitors every project announcement, every press release. Is that why you're here, Mom? To gather intelligence for Dad and Jason? I'm here because I miss my daughter, she said, tears welling in her eyes. Is that so hard to believe? It was actually, but the tears seemed genuine. My mother had perfected the art of compartmentalization. She could genuinely miss me while still serving my father's interests. The two weren't mutually exclusive in her mind. As lunch progressed, she asked increasingly specific questions about my work at Pinnacle. How was the Singapore bid progressing? Was Robert Caldwell considering retirement? What other major projects were in development? I answered vaguely at first, then more specifically, as she seemed genuinely interested in my work for the first time in my career. When she asked about our upcoming bid for the Wellington Towers redevelopment, a massive historic renovation project that would establish Pinnacle as a leader in sustainable historic preservation, I found myself sharing details about our innovative approach. That sounds remarkable, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I always knew you had vision. It's what makes you so different from Jason and from your father. The compliment warmed me, breaking down the last of my defenses. For the next hour I talked more openly than I had in years, relieved to finally have my mother see me as a professional in my own right. When we parted, she hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Scarlett. Always have been." I walked back to my apartment with a lighter heart than I'd had in months. Perhaps there was hope for salvaging at least one family relationship. That hope lasted exactly 2 days. Emergency meeting now, Robert messaged Wednesday morning. His tone left no room for questions. When I arrived at the conference room, Grace was already there, her expression grim. Robert paced by the windows, tension evident in every movement. The Wellington bid is dead, he said without preamble. They've pulled out of negotiations and gone exclusively with Mitchell Enterprises. How our proposal was revolutionary. The sustainability aspects alone. Mitchell's new proposal matches ours point for point, Grace interrupted, sliding a document across the table, including proprietary elements we developed internally. I stared at the papers in disbelief. Mitchell Enterprises' proposal contained our exact approach, our innovations, even similar language in some sections. There's more, Robert continued. They've underbid us by 15%, a financially unsustainable figure unless they were absolutely certain of winning. They knew exactly what to bid to beat us. I whispered the truth, dawning with sickening clarity. Because they knew exactly what we were bidding. There's been a leak, Grace confirmed. A significant one. The lunch with my mother replayed in my mind her specific questions, her unusual interest in my work, the warmth that had seemed so foreign yet so welcome. It was me, I admitted, shame burning through me. I met with my mother for lunch. She She seemed genuinely interested in my work for the first time. I shared details about Wellington. I didn't think. I couldn't finish the sentence. I hadn't thought my own mother would betray me so completely. Robert's expression softened slightly. Family relationships are complicated, Scarlett. We all have blind spots. Check your phone, Grace suggested quietly. I pulled out my cell phone to find 3 missed calls from my mother. There was also a voicemail which I played on speaker. Scarlett, I'm so sorry. My mother's voice sounded broken, genuinely distressed. Your father, he recorded our lunch. I didn't know. He threatened to divorce me with nothing if I didn't help him. I know that's no excuse. I've betrayed you in the worst way. I understand if you never forgive me, but please know I truly am proud of you. The strength you've shown in standing up to this family. I wish I had half your courage. The message ended, leaving a heavy silence in the room. She recorded your conversation, Robert said, not a question but a statement. I nodded, too ashamed to speak. The Wellington contract would have been transformative for us, he continued, no accusation in his voice, just fact. We need to contain this damage and prevent further leaks. I'll create a misinformation protocol, said a voice from the doorway. We all turned to see Michael Donovan, Pinnacle's financial analyst, standing with a laptop under his arm. In his early 30s with dark-rimmed glasses and a quiet intensity, Michael had always been peripheral to my core team, providing financial projections when needed but generally working in the background. I couldn't help overhearing, he said, stepping into the room. And I think I can help. How? Robert asked. Michael placed his laptop on the table, opening it to display a complex spreadsheet. We feed controlled misinformation through Miss Mitchell to her family. Different false projects, different targets, different approaches. When Mitchell Enterprises acts on that information, we'll not only know definitively they're using her as a source, we'll also be able to trace exactly how the information flows through their organization. A trap, Grace said, impressed. Legal, ethical, and potentially devastating if they act on false information. It would require Miss Mitchell to maintain contact with her mother. Michael pointed out, looking at me with unexpected compassion. Which might be difficult under the circumstances. I straightened my shoulders, professionalism overtaking emotion. I can do it. I need to fix this. Robert studied Michael with new interest. How long have you been with Pinnacle, Mr. Donovan? 3 years, sir. Previously, at Goldman Sachs, I specialized in detecting financial fraud patterns. Well, it seems your skills have wider application. Draft your misinformation protocol and coordinate with Scarlett and Grace. If Mitchell Enterprises wants to play dirty, let's make sure they get thoroughly muddy in the process. Over the next week, Michael and I worked closely developing an elaborate web of false information fictional projects with subtle, fatal flaws, potential clients with hidden deal breakers, technological innovations that wouldn't actually work in practice. Each piece of misinformation was crafted to be believable, but ultimately disastrous if acted upon. During our long hours together, I learned that Michael had grown up in circumstances not entirely unlike mine, a demanding father with impossibly high standards, though his had been an academic rather than a businessman. He wanted me to be a theoretical physicist like him, Michael explained one night as we finalized our strategy. When I chose finance, he didn't speak to me for 2 years. What happened? I asked, recognizing the familiar pain in his eyes. He got cancer. Suddenly, all the academic achievements and disappointments seemed trivial. We reconciled before he died. He adjusted his glasses. Not everyone gets that opportunity with their parents. Some relationships never heal. Are you saying I should forgive my mother? I asked, surprised by the direction of the conversation. I'm saying family is complicated. Manipulation, love, betrayal, loyalty, they get all tangled together. Your mother made a terrible choice, but at least she recognized it as terrible. He smiled slightly. My professional opinion as a pattern recognition specialist, she's a weak link in their chain, and weak links can be useful. We implemented our plan carefully, me reaching out to my mother with a carefully scripted apology for overreacting. Her relief was palpable, her eagerness to reconnect almost painful in its desperation. Over the next 3 weeks, I fed her a steady diet of misinformation, crafted to appeal to exactly what my father and brother would want to hear. The results were spectacular. Mitchell Enterprises bid aggressively on a Singapore high-rise that didn't actually exist, publicly announcing their involvement before discovering the client was a fictional entity. They hired 3 specialists in vacuum-sealed concrete technology. Based on our misinformation about a revolutionary approach, Pinnacle was developing technology that any serious engineer would know violated basic physics. Most satisfyingly, they restructured an entire division to compete with Pinnacle's planned expansion into medical facility construction, a sector we had no intention of entering. Each embarrassing misstep damaged Mitchell Enterprises' reputation, while simultaneously proving they were acting on information stolen through my mother. The industry began to whisper about Richard Mitchell losing his touch, about Jason's leadership capabilities being oversold. The trap worked perfectly, Michael said with quiet satisfaction, as we reviewed the latest industry news. Your father and brother acted on every piece of bait we dangled. They're desperate, I replied, understanding my family better now that I could view them with some distance. Dad's always feared irrelevance more than anything. Seeing me succeed independently threatens his entire worldview. Michael hesitated, then added, there's something else you should know. Your mother hasn't been passing all the information directly to your father. According to my analysis of the timing and implementation of their responses, she's been filtering what she gives him. What do you mean? Some of our most damaging misinformation, the items that would have caused serious financial harm rather than just embarrassment, never made it to implementation. Given how aggressively they've acted on everything else, the only logical conclusion is that your mother withheld those pieces. I sat back processing this revelation. She's trying to minimize the damage, playing both sides. Or maybe she's just a mother who doesn't want to completely destroy her daughter's career even while betraying her. He shrugged. Like I said, family is complicated. As we packed up for the evening, Michael paused at the door. For what it's worth, Scarlett, I think you're extraordinary. Most people would have crumbled under what your family has put you through. Instead, you've thrived. The unexpected compliment caught me off guard. Thank you for helping me fix my mistake, I said, suddenly aware of how much time we'd been spending together, how comfortable his presence had become. Partners look out for each other, he replied with a small smile. And I think we make quite good partners. As he left, I realized that in the midst of all this family drama, I'd gained something unexpected, not just allies in Grace and Michael, but perhaps something more with the latter, something that felt dangerously like hope. The headline splashed across the Boston Business Journal hit like a physical blow. Mitchell Enterprises announces revolutionary eco-restoration project. The accompanying article detailed a comprehensive plan for sustainable urban development that was point for point identical to Pinnacle's confidential flagship initiative, a project we'd been developing for 6 months and weeks away from announcing. This is impossible, I whispered, scanning the article in disbelief. This information wasn't part of our misinformation campaign. These are our actual plans, our real innovation. Grace and Robert exchanged grim looks across the conference room table. Could your mother have obtained this information some other way? Robert asked carefully. No, I've been extremely careful since the Wellington disaster. We've only discussed this project in secure rooms with limited personnel. I looked around at the small circle of executives who knew the details. There's been another leak, but it wasn't through me. Check the server access logs, Robert instructed our IT director. See who's been accessing the project files. While we waited, I called my mother, my voice tightly controlled. The eco-restoration announcement. How did Dad get that information? Her confusion sounded genuine. What announcement, Scarlett? I haven't spoken to your father about Pinnacle in weeks, not since. She paused. Not since I realized what he was doing with the information I provided. Either she was an exceptional actress or she was telling the truth. Before I could press further, the IT director returned, his expression troubled. We found something, but it doesn't make sense. The project files were accessed 3 weeks ago using Miss Mitchell's credentials, but the access originated from an IP address inside Mitchell Enterprises. All eyes turned to me. That's impossible, I said firmly. I haven't set foot in that building since the video incident. Someone has your login credentials, Grace concluded. And they're sophisticated enough to make it look like you're the lead. The pieces clicked together in my mind. Jason, I said with certainty. He must have obtained my password somehow. He's setting me up to look like a corporate spy. If that's true, Robert said slowly, he's crossed from corporate rivalry into criminal territory. Corporate espionage carries serious legal consequences. We need proof, Grace cautioned. Accusations this serious require irrefutable evidence. Michael, who had been quietly analyzing the situation, spoke up. We might be able to trace the breach if we act quickly. And there's something else to consider. If they've stolen our eco-restoration project, they're rushing to implement it without proper testing or refinement. What are you suggesting? I asked. A slight smile crossed his face. Mitchell Enterprises is about to announce a major initiative based on incomplete information. They don't have our safety protocols or contingency plans. If they try to implement this half-baked version, they'll fail spectacularly. Robert finished, understanding dawning. And when they do, we'll be ready with the complete, properly tested version. Precisely, Michael confirmed. Sometimes the best revenge is letting your enemy defeat themselves. We didn't have to wait long. Within a week, Mitchell Enterprises held a lavish press conference announcing their groundbreaking eco-restoration approach. My father and Jason stood side by side on the stage, presenting stolen innovations as their own, promising a revolutionary approach to sustainable development. Mitchell Enterprises has always led from the front, my father proclaimed to the assembled press. This initiative represents the future of responsible development, a future others talk about, but only Mitchell delivers. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so infuriating. As predicted, they rushed to implement the stolen plans without fully understanding the underlying engineering. 2 weeks later, the test site for their first eco-restoration project experienced a catastrophic system failure, exactly the issue our team had identified and resolved months ago in our refined version. The business press that had lauded Mitchell Enterprises' visionary approach now questioned their competence. Environmental groups that had cautiously praised their apparent commitment to sustainability now criticized their reckless implementation. Your family's company is hemorrhaging credibility, Grace informed me after reviewing the latest industry analyses. 3 board members have resigned, citing concerns about leadership decisions. And I've compiled the evidence of corporate espionage, Michael added, placing a thick folder on my desk. Server logs, IP traces, access patterns, all pointing directly to Jason Mitchell. It's enough for a criminal complaint. I stared at the folder, torn between vindication and an unexpected reluctance. If we pursue criminal charges, it destroys Mitchell Enterprises completely. They tried to destroy you, Grace reminded me. They've stolen intellectual property, engaged in corporate espionage, manipulated markets, all to undermine you personally, and Pinnacle professionally. I know, I said quietly. But there are hundreds of employees at Mitchell Enterprises who had nothing to do with my father and brother's vendetta. People who would lose their livelihoods. Robert, who had been listening silently, nodded with something like approval. What do you suggest instead? I took a deep breath, an idea forming, one that had been germinating since the first betrayal. We offer a merger. The room fell silent. Mitchell Enterprises is vulnerable but still valuable, I continued. Their property holdings alone are worth billions. Their client relationships go back generations. We offer to absorb them into Pinnacle with conditions my father retires. Jason steps down from leadership and we implement Pinnacle's ethical standards and sustainable practices across the entire organization. That's ambitious, Robert said carefully. Richard Mitchell would never agree to step down. He would if the alternative was watching his legacy crumble completely, I countered. And if the board forces his hand, which they might given the evidence of corporate espionage, Grace acknowledged. It's an elegant solution. Instead of destroying Mitchell Enterprises, you transform it. We transform it, I corrected, together. The plan required precision timing. First, we quietly approached key Mitchell Enterprises board members with evidence of the corporate espionage, making it clear that criminal charges were being considered. Then, as those board members began emergency discussions, we publicly released our complete refined eco-restoration initiative, demonstrating both our technological superiority and the extent of Mitchell's theft. The business community's reaction was swift. Mitchell Enterprises' stock plummeted while Pinnacle's soared. Clients began pulling projects unwilling to associate with a company mired in scandal. Just as the crisis reached its peak, I received a text from an unexpected source. He's planning to blame you publicly. Emergency press conference tomorrow, claiming you fed false information as corporate sabotage. Mom, it was the opening we needed. The next morning, as my father prepared to deliver his desperate countermeasure, I received a call from an unknown number. Miss Mitchell, this is Bernard Hoffman, chairman of the Mitchell Enterprises board. We need to talk, immediately. 3 hours later, I sat across from the entire Mitchell board in their executive conference room, the same room where less than a year ago my brother had stolen my presentation, and my father had praised him for it. The evidence Mr. Donovan has compiled is troubling, Hoffman said after reviewing our files. Criminal charges would be devastating to the company. There's an alternative, I replied calmly. A merger with Pinnacle Industries. We absorb Mitchell Enterprises, preserve jobs, maintain client relationships, but implement new leadership and ethical standards. And your father and brother, Richard Mitchell, announces his retirement. Jason transitions to a non-executive role or leaves the company. Those terms are non-negotiable. Hoffman exchanged glances with his fellow board members. Your father built this company, and now he's destroying it, I countered. You know that, or you wouldn't have agreed to this meeting. After a tense silence, Hoffman nodded. We'll present the option to him. But I should warn you, Richard Mitchell doesn't surrender easily. Neither do I replied, rising to leave. You have 24 hours to decide. After that we proceed with criminal charges and let the chips fall where they may. As I walked out of Mitchell Enterprises for what might be the last time, I realized I was no longer seeking my father's approval or my family's acceptance. I was offering them salvation they didn't deserve, but I was offering it on my terms. For once I held all the power. The next morning my phone rang at precisely 9 a.m. Bernard Hoffman's voice was formal but resigned. The board has voted unanimously to accept Pinnacle's merger offer with all stipulated conditions. Your father disagreed vehemently, but has been persuaded that this is the only viable path forward. I allowed myself a single moment of pure satisfaction before responding professionally. I'll have our legal team draft the necessary documents immediately. There's one more thing, Hoffman added. Your father insists on delivering the news personally to the company. A final address as CEO. A warning flag raised in my mind. When? This afternoon at 2 p.m. I'll be there, I said, ending the call before he could object. I knew my father too well to trust his acceptance. Whatever he was planning for his final address, I needed to be present to counter it. This wasn't over yet, not until Richard Mitchell publicly admitted defeat. The Mitchell Enterprises auditorium buzzed with anxious energy as employees packed in for the hastily called all-hands meeting. Rumors had been swirling for days about the company's future amid plummeting stock prices and client defections. Now they would finally hear directly from the CEO. I slipped in through a side entrance, choosing a position against the wall where I could observe without being immediately noticed. Grace and Michael flanked me, providing both moral and strategic support. "Are you sure about this?" Grace whispered. "Your father is cornered. That makes him dangerous." "I need to hear what he says," I replied. "Whatever narrative he creates today will shape everything that follows." The lights dimmed, and Richard Mitchell strode onto the stage with the commanding presence that had defined his leadership for 30 years. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of the old admiration. He was a master at controlling a room. For 3 generations, Mitchell Enterprises has stood for excellence, integrity, and vision. He began, his resonant voice filling the space without a microphone. "Today I stand before you at a crossroads in our company's history." He paused, scanning the audience with practiced gravity. "Many of you have heard rumors. Yes, we face challenges. Yes, mistakes have been made. But Mitchell Enterprises will emerge stronger, as we always have." The familiar rhetoric sounded hollow given the circumstances, but the employees seemed to draw comfort from it, their postures relaxing slightly. "I've spent my life building this company, expanding what my father created, preparing it for the future," he continued. "Part of leadership is recognizing when it's time for change." Here it comes, I thought, bracing myself for whatever version of events he had crafted. "Today, I'm announcing a strategic merger with Pinnacle Industries, a partnership that combines Mitchell's unparalleled legacy with Pinnacle's innovative approach to sustainable development." Murmurs rippled through the audience. This wasn't the catastrophic announcement they had feared, but it represented a seismic shift for a company that had always prided itself on independence. "As part of this transition, I'll be stepping into an advisory role, passing the torch to new leadership." His voice remained steady, betraying none of the fury I knew he must be feeling. This decision wasn't made lightly, but in the best interest of the company's future. Just as I began to think he might actually deliver a dignified exit, his tone shifted subtly. "Some of you may wonder why this change comes now. The truth is both simple and painful." His gaze swept the room, landing briefly where I stood. "Family is everything to me. It always has been. Which makes betrayal by family the deepest cut of all." The atmosphere in the room tensed as employees sensed the personal drama unfolding. "My daughter Scarlett left Mitchell Enterprises abruptly last year, taking company knowledge to our competitor. While I tried to reconcile to bring her back into the fold with forgiveness and understanding, events have forced this more comprehensive solution." My blood boiled at the blatant revisionism. He was positioning himself as the magnanimous father reaching out to a wayward daughter, exactly the narrative that had driven me from the company in the first place. "The merger with Pinnacle represents my final act of paternal reconciliation, bringing my daughter's new company into the Mitchell fold, ensuring our family legacy continues despite personal disappointments." The audacity was breathtaking. In one masterful stroke, he was recasting his forced surrender as a generous parental gesture, portraying himself as the hero of a story in which he was unquestionably the villain. I felt Grace stiffen beside me. "He's spinning the narrative completely, making it sound like he orchestrated the merger out of fatherly love." "Classic Richard Mitchell," I muttered, watching the employees nodding sympathetically. "You need to counter this," Michael urged quietly. "Right now, before his version becomes reality." He was right. If I allowed this narrative to stand, nothing would really change. My father would retain influence through the mythology he was creating, undermining the merger from the beginning. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, moving purposefully toward the stage. A ripple of recognition spread through the audience as I approached the steps. My father faltered mid-sentence as he spotted me, genuine surprise crossing his features before his mask of control reasserted itself. "Ah, and here she is," now he recovered smoothly. "My daughter returning to the company where she belongs. Scarlett, would you like to say a few words about our reconciliation?" The invitation was a trap. Accepting his framing would validate everything he'd said. Instead, I approached the podium and turned to address both him and the audience. "Thank you, Richard," I said deliberately, using his first name rather than Dad to establish professional distance. I believe transparency is essential during transitions like this, so let me clarify a few points. I could see him tense, uncertain whether to interrupt me and risk looking petty, or allow me to speak and potentially undermine his narrative. The merger between Pinnacle Industries and Mitchell Enterprises represents a new chapter for both companies. I began choosing my words carefully, but it's important that we begin this chapter with honesty. I turned slightly to address the employees directly. Many of you have worked at Mitchell Enterprises for years, contributing your talents and loyalty. You deserve the truth. This merger isn't a reconciliation, it's a necessary intervention to save jobs and client relationships after serious ethical breaches by senior leadership. A murmur ran through the crowd. My father stepped forward as if to interrupt, but I continued firmly. Corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property, market manipulation. These aren't accusations, they're documented facts that left the board with no choice but to accept Pinnacle's offer as an alternative to criminal charges and company collapse. The room had gone completely silent. My father's face had turned to stone. I left Mitchell Enterprises last year because innovative ideas were suppressed, ethical concerns dismissed, and a toxic culture celebrated. The Disownment papers I received on my birthday were just the final confirmation that this company's leadership valued control over progress, loyalty over integrity. I softened my tone slightly. But Mitchell Enterprises is more than its leadership. It's all of you, the architects, engineers, project managers, and staff who do the actual work. The merger with Pinnacle isn't about family drama. It's about creating a company that values both Mitchell's legacy of excellence and Pinnacle's commitment to innovation and ethical business practices. Before my father could respond, the side door opened, and Bernard Hoffman entered with several board members. Their timing couldn't have been better if we'd coordinated it. "Miss Mitchell is correct," Hoffman announced, approaching the stage. "The board unanimously approved this merger after reviewing evidence of serious misconduct. While we respect Richard Mitchell's contributions to this company, the decision to merge with Pinnacle was made to protect Mitchell Enterprises' future, not as a family reconciliation." My father stood rigid, his carefully crafted narrative collapsing around him. For the first time in my life, I saw him at a complete loss for words. As the reality of the situation dawned on the employees, something unexpected happened. A slow applause began from the back of the room, spreading gradually until it filled the auditorium. It wasn't celebration exactly, more like acknowledgement, perhaps even relief that the truth was finally being spoken aloud. In that moment, watching my father's empire slip from his grasp, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a profound sadness for what could have been if he'd valued truth and integrity as much as power and control. As the meeting broke up, a longtime executive assistant approached me, Martha, who had worked for my father for over 20 years. "Miss Mitchell," she said quietly, pressing a USB drive into my hand. "I've kept records, things I thought someone should know someday." Her eyes held both regret and resolve. Sexual discrimination complaints that were buried, tax strategies that crossed legal lines, board members pressured into compliance. It's all there. I stared at the small device, understanding its explosive potential. "Why now?" "Because you spoke the truth," she replied simply. "And because it's time for things to change." As she walked away, I realized I now held in my hand the power to not just merge the companies, but to completely dismantle my father's legacy, to expose decades of misconduct, and potentially send him to prison. The choice was mine, and for the first time I understood the weight of true power, not the ability to destroy but the responsibility to decide what kind of future to build from the ashes of the past. 6 months after the dramatic confrontation in the Mitchell Enterprises auditorium, I stood on the rooftop garden of the newly inaugurated Pinnacle Mitchell headquarters. The building itself embodied the merger's philosophy, Mitchell's classic granite facade preserved and integrated with Pinnacle's cutting-edge sustainable technology. Solar panels gleamed alongside historic architectural details symbolic of how we'd merged tradition with innovation. "Quite a view," Robert Caldwell remarked, joining me at the railing. "Worth the wait, wouldn't you say?" Below us, Boston's skyline stretched toward the harbor, including several buildings now under our unified management. The merger had created the largest sustainable development company on the East Coast, transforming the industry landscape. "Definitely worth it," I agreed, "though I'm not sure I'd want to relive the past year to get here." Robert chuckled. "No once was quite enough." He gestured toward the gathering behind us, where executives from both former companies mingled with clients and city officials. "The board is extremely pleased with how you've handled the transition. 3 consecutive quarters of growth despite the upheaval, it's unprecedented." My father had indeed retired to spend time with family, as the press release stated, though the reality was far more complex. The evidence Martha had provided gave me leverage to ensure he stepped away completely, without the golden parachute or honorary position he'd demanded. Instead, we'd negotiated a private settlement, his silence and cooperation in exchange for our discretion regarding his past misconduct. Jason had not fared as well. His direct involvement in corporate espionage had legal consequences that couldn't be entirely mitigated. Rather than face criminal charges, he'd entered a rehabilitation program for substance abuse, a problem that had apparently been masked by his aggressive business persona for years. His breakdown after the merger announcement had revealed deeper issues than anyone had suspected. "Have you spoken with your mother recently?" Robert asked, interrupting my thoughts. "Weekly therapy sessions," I replied, still finding it surreal. Her therapist suggested family counseling eventually, but we're taking it slowly. She's living separately from my father, now finding her own identity again after 30 years. Diana Mitchell's journey toward independence had been one of the merger's unexpected positive outcomes. Free from my father's domination, she'd begun reconnecting with her original passion for architectural design, even consulting occasionally on Pinnacle Mitchell projects. "And your brother? Progress is slower there." I sighed. "The rehab program is helping with his substance issues, but the underlying personality problems, the need to dominate to win at all costs, those are harder to address. We exchange emails. Maybe someday we'll reach real understanding." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "Healing family wounds takes time, sometimes generations." "Speaking of which," I said, changing the subject as Grace Henderson approached, "I think your announcement is up next." Robert straightened his tie nervously. "Yes, well, change is in the air, isn't it?" Grace joined us, elegant as always in her tailored suit. "The press is getting restless, Robert. Ready to share your big news?" "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, heading toward the podium that had been set up near the garden's center. The crowd quieted as Robert tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for joining us today to celebrate not just a new headquarters but a new vision for sustainable development. Pinnacle Mitchell represents the best of both traditions, Mitchell's unparalleled legacy of excellence and Pinnacle's commitment to innovation." He paused, surveying the gathered company. "Today marks another transition. After 30 years at Pinnacle's helm, I've decided it's time for new leadership to guide this merged entity into the future." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Despite months of preparation, the reality of Robert's retirement still felt momentous. "The board has unanimously approved my recommendation that Scarlett Mitchell assume the role of CEO effective immediately." He gestured for me to join him at the podium. "Her vision made this merger possible. Her leadership will make it successful." The applause was genuine as I stepped up beside him. Robert had been my mentor, my champion when I most needed one. Now he was entrusting me with the company he'd built over 3 decades. Additionally, Robert continued once the applause subsided, "I'm pleased to announce our new executive leadership team, Grace Henderson as Chief Legal Officer and Michael Donovan as Chief Financial Officer. As Grace and Michael joined us at the podium, I felt a surge of pride. The allies who had stood with me through the darkest moments would now help shape our company's future. After the formal announcements concluded and the crowd dispersed to networking and champagne, Michael found me near the garden's edge. "Congratulations, CEO Mitchell," he said, with the slight smile that had become increasingly familiar over our months of working closely together. What had begun as professional alliance had gradually evolved into something deeper: dinners that extended long past business discussions, weekend walks along the Charles River, conversations that ranged far beyond corporate strategy. "Thank you, CFO Donovan," I replied, matching his formality with a smile of my own. "Think we can make this work? The company, or—" He gestured subtly between us, acknowledging the personal relationship we'd been cautiously building. "Both," I answered honestly. His expression turned thoughtful. "You know what I've learned watching you these past months? True strength isn't about demolishing obstacles, it's about transforming them into something better. You could have destroyed your father's company, but you chose to rebuild it instead. That's remarkable." "I had good advisors," I said, thinking of how he and Grace had helped me navigate the darkest moments. "You had courage," he countered. "And yes, I think we can definitely make this work." He touched my hand briefly, professionally appropriate, yet personally meaningful. All of it. Later that evening, after the celebration wound down, I made the drive I'd been postponing for weeks. The retirement community in Cambridge was elegant and discreet, perfect for a former CEO who preferred people believe he was traveling Europe rather than recovering from a minor stroke brought on by the stress of losing his company. The nurse showed me to a small private garden where my father sat alone staring at a chessboard with no opponent. "Scarlett," he acknowledged without looking up. "Come to gloat?" "No," I said, quietly taking the seat across from him. "Just to check on you." He looked older now, diminished somehow without his corporate armor. "The doctor says I'm improving. I'll be back to full strength soon." We both knew it wasn't true. The stroke had affected his speech slightly, his memory more significantly. The once formidable Richard Mitchell now struggled to recall board members' names and company statistics that had once been instantly accessible to him. "The new headquarters opened today," I said, moving a chess piece idly. "The sustainability features are already attracting international attention. Mitchell architecture with Pinnacle gimmicks," he muttered, but without real venom. "Integration of the best aspects of both," I corrected gently. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our complicated history hanging between us. "I never understood you," he finally said, surprising me with his candor. "You were so different from what I expected." "I was your daughter, not your clone," I replied. That shouldn't have been so threatening. He moved a chess piece, his hand trembling slightly. "I built that company for my children. Everything I did, the long hours, the hard decisions, it was all for the Mitchell legacy. Then you rejected it all." "I rejected your methods, not your legacy," I said carefully. "The Mitchell name now stands for sustainable innovation, ethical business practices, and industry leadership. That's a legacy worth preserving." "Under Pinnacle's banner," he added bitterly. "Under Pinnacle Mitchell's banner," I corrected. "Your name comes second now, but it's still there." "That was my choice." He looked up sharply. "What do you mean your choice?" I had never told him about the USB drive, about how close he had come to total disgrace rather than merely corporate defeat. Perhaps I never would. "The merger terms," I said simply. I insisted on keeping Mitchell in the name despite some board members wanting a clean break. He studied me with new awareness, perhaps finally recognizing that the daughter he had underestimated now held power he could only imagine, including the power of mercy. "Why?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Because destroying isn't the same as winning," I replied. "You taught me that actually. You just forgot it somewhere along the way." As I rose to leave, he called after me, "Will you come again?" The question contained a vulnerability I'd never heard from him before. Not quite an apology, not quite reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of something new. Yes, I said. I will. Driving back to the city, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the crushing betrayal of those disownment papers to the CEO position of a company larger than my father had ever managed. From family rejection to building a new kind of family with Grace, Michael, and even Robert as a father figure of sorts. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. Some wounds leave permanent scars, but it had transformed into something constructive, driving me to create rather than destroy. As the Boston skyline came into view, lights twinkling against the evening sky, I felt a sense of peace that had nothing to do with corporate success. I had built something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. I had refused to become what had hurt me, and in the end that was the most important victory of all. So what would you do if you were betrayed by family? Would you seek revenge or try to rebuild something better from the pieces? Let me know in the comments below. If you've experienced family drama that led to unexpected growth, share your story. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of resilience, and hit that share button if you know someone who needs to hear this message of transformation. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember that sometimes rejection is just redirection to something far better than you could have imagined.